rise and fall of Diddy's mansion empire. Inside the FBI raids. On March 25, 2024, the world watched in disbelief as federal agents descended upon two of the most exclusive addresses in America. In Los Angeles, armed officers from Homeland Security Investigations stormed a 17,000-square-foot mansion in the exclusive Holmby Hills neighborhood, one of the most prestigious enclaves in Beverly Hills. At the exact same moment, 3,000 miles away in Miami, another team of federal agents surrounded a sprawling waterfront compound on Star Island, the legendary private island where only the wealthiest and most powerful celebrities dare to live. The target of these coordinated raids was Sean Combs, known to the world as Diddy, Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, and simply Love. For 3 decades, he had been one of the most influential figures in American entertainment, a hip-hop mogul who had built an empire spanning music, fashion, television, and spirits. His real estate portfolio alone was worth over $100 million. His mansions were symbols of his success, monuments to the American dream of a man who had risen from the streets of Harlem to become one of the wealthiest entertainers in history. But on that day in March, those mansions became crime scenes, and the images that emerged from those raids of federal agents in tactical gear surrounding properties that had hosted the most legendary parties in entertainment history marked the beginning of the end for one of the most powerful men in the music industry. This is the story of how Sean Combs built his mansion empire, how those mansions became the settings for crimes that would shock the nation, and how federal agents tore that empire apart, piece by piece, revealing secrets that had been hidden behind those gilded gates for decades. If this story matters to you, take a moment to subscribe and support the channel. Your support means everything, and I want to hear from you in the comments. Did you see the signs before the raids? What do you think justice looks like for the victims in this case? Leave your thoughts below. Chapter 1. The Making of a Mogul. To understand the mansions, you first have to understand the man who built them. Sean John Combs was born on November 4, 1969 in Harlem, New York. His childhood was marked by tragedy when his father, Melvin Earl Combs, was shot and killed when Sean was just 2 years old. His mother, Janice, worked multiple jobs to support Sean and his sister, eventually moving the family to Mount Vernon, a suburb just north of the Bronx. From his earliest years, Combs displayed an almost supernatural drive to succeed. He attended Mount St. Michael Academy, a private Catholic school, where classmates gave him the nickname Puff because of his habit of puffing up his chest when he was angry. That nickname would follow him into adulthood, eventually becoming part of his brand identity as Puff Daddy. After high school, Combs enrolled at Howard University in Washington, D.C., but his real education was happening outside the classroom. He interned at Uptown Records in New York, commuting between Washington and Manhattan to work at the label while maintaining his studies. His energy and ambition were impossible to ignore, and by the age of 19, he had been promoted to talent director at the label. At Uptown, Combs helped develop artists like Mary J. Blige and Jodeci, learning the business from the inside. But in 1993, he was fired from Uptown Records, a setback that would have derailed most young executives. Instead, Combs used it as a motivation to build something of his own. That same year, he founded Bad Boy Records with a $15,000 loan. It was a bold move for a 24-year-old who had just been fired from his previous job, but Combs had the confidence and the vision to make it work. Within months, he had signed a rapper named Christopher Wallace, better known as the notorious B.I.G. or Biggie Smalls. The partnership between Combs and Biggie would change hip-hop forever, creating a sound and a style that would dominate the music industry for years. In 1994, Bad Boy released its first album, Biggie's Ready to Die. The album was a sensation, combining raw street narratives with polished production that made the music accessible to mainstream audiences. Tracks like Juicy and Big Papa became anthems, playing on radio stations across the country and introducing hip-hop to audiences who had never listened to the genre before. The album eventually went quadruple platinum, selling more than 4 million copies and establishing Bad Boy as a major force in the music industry. Combs had found his formula: sign talented artists who had authentic street credibility, produce slick, radio-friendly tracks that could cross over to pop audiences, and promote relentlessly using every media opportunity available. The success continued with artists like Faith Evans, Total, and 112, all of whom found commercial success under the Bad Boy umbrella. Combs developed a signature production style, often sampling classic R&B and soul records and layering them with contemporary beats. The Bad Boy sound became instantly recognizable, and Combs' name as a producer was almost as valuable as the artists he worked with. Then, tragedy struck. On March 9, 1997, the notorious B.I.G. was shot and killed in Los Angeles, just months after the murder of rival rapper Tupac Shakur. The deaths marked the violent culmination of the East Coast-West Coast hip-hop rivalry that had dominated headlines. For Combs, the loss of Biggie was both personal and professional, the death of a friend and the loss of his label's biggest star. But Combs channeled his grief into work. Later that year, he released No Way Out, his debut album as a solo artist under the name Puff Daddy. The album featured I'll Be Missing You, a tribute to Biggie that sampled the Police's Every Breath You Take and became one of the biggest hits of the year. The album went 7 times platinum and won the Grammy for Best Rap Album. Combs was no longer just a producer and executive. He was a star in his own right. The success of Bad Boy Records made Combs a wealthy man almost overnight, but his ambitions extended far beyond music. He launched a clothing line called Sean John in 1998, which would eventually generate hundreds of millions in annual revenue. He partnered with Diageo to promote Ciroc vodka, a deal that reportedly earned him over $60 million annually at its peak. He invested in television, creating the MTV reality show Making the Band. He acquired stakes in various businesses, from water brands to tequila companies. By the early 2000s, Sean Combs was not just a music producer or a rapper. He was a brand, a mogul, a symbol of black entrepreneurial success in America. And as his wealth grew, so did his appetite for real estate. Chapter 2. Building the Empire. The first major property acquisition that signaled Combs' arrival in the upper echelons of wealth was his purchase of a mansion on Star Island in Miami Beach. Star Island is not just any neighborhood. It is one of the most exclusive residential communities in the United States, a man-made island in Biscayne Bay that is home to fewer than 40 residences, all of them occupied by billionaires, celebrities, and the global elite. The island was created in 1922 by the Army Corps of Engineers, dredged from the sand of Biscayne Bay as part of the development of Miami Beach. From its earliest days, it attracted the wealthy and famous, offering the ultimate combination of luxury and privacy. The island is accessible only by a single bridge that is guarded 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Residents and their guests must pass through security to enter, and the island's private security force patrols constantly, ensuring that the wealthy inhabitants can enjoy their properties without interference from the outside world. Actor Don Johnson lived there during the height of Miami Vice, the television show that made Miami synonymous with glamour and excess in the 1980s. Rosie O'Donnell owned a home on the island before selling it to art patrons David and Linda Frankel. Gloria and Emilio Estefan, the Cuban-American music power couple, owned one of the most beautiful properties on Star Island for decades, a Mediterranean-style villa that would eventually become part of Diddy's compound. Shaquille O'Neal lived on the island when he played for the Miami Heat, owning a massive property that he sold to Naomi Campbell's billionaire boyfriend, Vladislav Doronin. The island has been home to hedge fund billionaires, tech entrepreneurs, and celebrities from every field of entertainment. Real estate experts describe Star Island as the pinnacle of Miami luxury. Star Island has always lived up to its name and been somewhat of a playground for celebrities. One agent noted, "If you want to be near the action, yet have privacy and exclusivity, it does not get any better than Star Island." The homes on the island are not just expensive. They are statements of ultimate arrival, proof that their owners have achieved the highest levels of success. Combs purchased his first Star Island property in 2003 for approximately $14.5 million. The 7-bedroom, 8-bathroom waterfront mansion was built in 2002 and offered everything a mogul could want. Private boat dock, swimming pool, stunning views of Biscayne Bay and the Miami skyline, and most importantly, the privacy and security that came with living on an island accessible only by a guarded bridge. But one mansion on Star Island was not enough for Diddy. Nearly 20 years later, in July 2021, he purchased the property next door for $35 million. This mansion, known as Nena's Villa, had previously been owned by Gloria and Emilio Estefan, who had bought it in 1993 for just $1.8 million. The 8,000-square-foot home sat on 1.3 acres and featured 6 bedrooms, 10 bathrooms, and an immaculate outdoor sanctuary with views that seemed to stretch forever across the turquoise waters of Biscayne Bay. With the purchase of the second Star Island property, Combs now controlled a compound worth approximately $50 million in one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in America. The two properties together offered 15 bedrooms, 20 bathrooms, and waterfront footage that allowed Combs to arrive and depart by boat whenever he wished, adding another layer of privacy to his already secluded compound. But Miami was only half of the empire. In 2014, Combs purchased what would become his West Coast headquarters, a sprawling estate in the Holmby Hills neighborhood of Los Angeles. The 17,000-square-foot mansion cost $39 million and was located in one of the most prestigious zip codes in America, adjacent to Beverly Hills and home to some of the most expensive real estate in the world. The Holmby Hills mansion was a monument to luxury. 10 bedrooms, 13 bathrooms, a bar, wine cellar, and library. An indoor sauna and a gymnasium. A state-of-the-art home theater that could accommodate 35 people. A swimming pool with a waterfall and grotto that looked like something from a tropical resort. A basketball court, a spa house, an outdoor covered loggia with a barbecue, bar, and pizza oven. Mature trees and formal gardens surrounded the property, creating an oasis of privacy in the heart of Los Angeles. The listing description, when Combs later tried to sell the property, called it one of the most spectacular and beautiful estates in the exclusive Holmby Hills neighborhood. It featured classic European details throughout, combining old-world elegance with modern luxury amenities. For Combs, it was the perfect stage for his West Coast operations and the legendary parties that would make the mansion infamous. Beyond these flagship properties, Combs also owned a condominium in Miami Beach overlooking Biscayne Bay, purchased in 2012 for $2.7 million. He had previously owned a 3.5-acre estate in Alpine, New Jersey, which he purchased in 2004 and sold in 2016 for $5.5 million. He purchased a home in Atlanta that he later abandoned. He bought a $5.25 million home for his late ex-partner, Kim Porter, the mother of 3 of his children. At the peak of his real estate empire, Sean Combs controlled properties worth well over $100 million. These were not just homes. They were statements of power, symbols of success, venues for the parties that made him legendary, and, as investigators would later allege, crime scenes where terrible acts occurred behind closed doors. Chapter 3. The parties. If there was one thing Sean Combs was famous for besides his music, it was his parties. For decades, Diddy's parties were considered the most exclusive events in entertainment. An invitation to a Diddy party was a golden ticket, a sign that you had arrived in the world of celebrity and power. The most legendary of these events were his annual white parties, held on various occasions at his Hamptons estate and his Miami compound. Guests were required to dress entirely in white, creating a sea of beautiful people in pristine clothing against backdrops of swimming pools and ocean views. The guest lists read like a who's who of entertainment, sports, and business. Leonardo DiCaprio, Jay-Z and Beyoncé, Paris Hilton, Ashton Kutcher, Mariah Carey. The parties were covered extensively by media outlets, and photographs from them became iconic images of celebrity excess. At his Star Island compound, Combs hosted New Year's Eve parties that became annual traditions. Hundreds of guests would gather as the clock struck midnight, with celebrities like DJ Khaled, The Weeknd, Travis Scott, Future, and Scottie Pippen counted among the regular attendees. The parties featured flowing Ciroc vodka, which Combs promoted as part of his lucrative deal with Diageo, and the events often continued until dawn. When rapper Rick Ross purchased a $37 million mansion on Star Island in 2023, it was Diddy who welcomed him to the neighborhood. In a video that went viral on social media, Combs presented Ross with a golf cart as a housewarming gift while offering some ironic advice about neighborhood etiquette. "This is an intimate space," Diddy told his new neighbor. "No parties, no pool parties. I'm the head of the committee." The irony of these words would become apparent when investigators began looking into what actually happened at Combs's Star Island compound. But the public parties, lavish as they were only part of the story. According to prosecutors and witnesses who would later testify at Combs's trial, there were other parties happening behind closed doors. Private parties, secret parties, parties that Combs allegedly called freak-offs. These were not the glamorous affairs captured by paparazzi. According to testimony that would emerge during the federal investigation and subsequent trial, these were drug-fueled sexual encounters involving Combs, his girlfriends, and male escorts hired through websites and paid thousands of dollars for their services. The freak-offs allegedly lasted for days at a time, with participants staying awake on drugs while Combs directed the activities like a filmmaker orchestrating a scene. The mansions that had symbolized Combs' success were allegedly the primary venues for these activities. According to prosecutors, the Los Angeles and Miami properties were regularly used for freak-offs that sometimes continued for 48 to 72 hours. The rooms would be prepared with specific supplies, cases of baby oil, lubricants, condoms, and drugs including ecstasy, molly, cocaine, and ketamine. For years, these allegations remained hidden, known only to those who participated and those who helped arrange them. But in 2023, the secrets began to emerge. Chapter 4. The lawsuits begin. On November 16, 2023, everything changed for Sean Combs. That was the day his former girlfriend, the R&B singer Cassandra Ventura, known professionally as Cassie, filed a lawsuit that would open the floodgates. Cassie had been signed to Bad Boy Records when she was just 19 years old in 2005. She met Combs that same year, and their relationship quickly became romantic as well as professional. They were together, on and off, for more than a decade, until their final breakup in 2018. In her lawsuit, filed in federal court in Manhattan, Cassie alleged that Combs had subjected her to years of physical abuse, sexual assault, and rape. She alleged that he had controlled every aspect of her life, from her career to her personal relationships. She alleged that he had forced her to participate in drug-fueled sexual encounters with male prostitutes while he watched and directed the activities. She alleged that he had beaten her so severely on multiple occasions that she required medical treatment. The lawsuit was filed under New York's Adult Survivors Act, a law that gave victims of sexual abuse a one-year window to file civil lawsuits regardless of how long ago the alleged abuse occurred. This law opened the door for victims who had previously been barred by statutes of limitations from seeking justice. One of the most shocking allegations in Cassie's lawsuit involved a 2016 incident at a Los Angeles hotel. She alleged that Combs had chased her down a hotel hallway, kicked her, and thrown objects at her. At the time, this allegation was just words on paper. But months later, video footage of the incident would emerge, and the world would see exactly what Combs was capable of. The day after Cassie filed her lawsuit, the case was settled under confidential terms. Many assumed that the settlement meant the matter was closed, that Combs had paid to make the problem go away. But the lawsuit had opened a door that could not be shut again. Within weeks, other accusers came forward. A woman named Joey Dickerson Neal filed a lawsuit alleging that Combs had drugged and raped her in 1991 when she was a Syracuse University student and had secretly recorded the assault. Another accuser alleged that Combs had raped her at a party when she was just 17 years old. A man named Lil Rod, a producer who had worked on Combs's 2023 album, filed a $30 million lawsuit alleging that Combs had groped him repeatedly, forced him to solicit prostitutes, and subjected him to other forms of abuse. Each lawsuit added new details to the emerging picture of Combs' alleged behavior. The allegations were remarkably consistent: physical violence, control, drugs, forced sexual encounters, and the use of Combs' power and wealth to silence anyone who might speak out. Combs denied all the allegations. In December 2023, he posted a statement on Instagram declaring his innocence. For the last couple of weeks, I've sat silently and watched people try to assassinate my character, destroy my reputation and my legacy, he said. Sickening allegations have been made against me by individuals looking for a quick payday. Let me be absolutely clear. I did not do any of the awful things being alleged. I will fight for my name, my family, and for the truth. But the lawsuits had attracted the attention of federal investigators. By early 2024, Homeland Security investigations agents in New York were conducting interviews with accusers and gathering evidence. They were building a case that would lead them directly to Diddy's mansions. Chapter 5. The Raids. The morning of March 25, 2024, began like any other day at Sean Combs's properties. But by afternoon, both of his flagship mansions had been transformed into federal crime scenes. In Los Angeles, news helicopters captured the dramatic footage as dozens of agents from Homeland Security investigations surrounded the Holmby Hills estate. Officers in tactical gear, some wearing jackets clearly marked with HSI insignia, could be seen taking positions around the property. The gates that had kept out the world for years were now no match for federal search warrants. At the same moment, 3,000 miles away, agents descended upon Combs' Star Island compound in Miami. The exclusive island, accessible only by a guarded bridge, offered no protection against the federal government. Agents arrived by both land and water, surrounding the property from every angle. Combs was in Miami at the time of the raids. According to law enforcement sources, he was preparing to depart for a trip to the Bahamas when agents seized his phones. His sons, Justin and King Combs, were present at the Los Angeles property, and footage from the scene appeared to show them being briefly detained in handcuffs before being released. The raids lasted for hours, with teams of agents methodically working through both properties. In Los Angeles, agents conducted a thorough search of the 17,000-square-foot mansion, moving room by room through the enormous estate. They opened safes that Combs had used to store valuables and documents. They removed electronics, including laptops, tablets, and storage devices that might contain evidence. They photographed every room, documenting the layout and contents of the property that prosecutors would later describe as a venue for criminal activity. In Miami, the same process unfolded at the Star Island compound. The dual properties presented a massive undertaking for investigators, who had to search approximately 21,000 combined square feet of living space across multiple buildings. Federal agents were seen carrying out boxes, bags, and various items from both properties, loading them into vehicles for transport to evidence storage facilities. The coordination between the two raids was precise and deliberate. By executing both warrants simultaneously, investigators ensured that evidence at one location could not be destroyed while they were searching the other. The element of surprise was critical. Agents needed to secure potential evidence before anyone had the opportunity to hide or eliminate it. Sources reported that there was significant property damage at both locations during the searches. The iron gate at the Miami property appeared damaged in photographs taken during the raid, bent and twisted where agents had forced entry. Inside the properties, the thorough nature of the searches meant that rooms were left in disarray as agents examined every potential hiding place for evidence. The media presence at both locations was extensive. News helicopters hovered over the properties, capturing aerial footage that would be broadcast around the world. Photographers gathered outside the gates, documenting the arrival and departure of federal vehicles. The raids were not just law enforcement operations. They were public spectacles that announced to the world that Sean Combs was under serious federal investigation. The day after the raids, Combs' attorney, Aaron Dyer, released a statement denouncing what he called a gross overuse of military-level force. The statement claimed that the raid was an unprecedented ambush, paired with an advanced, coordinated media presence that led to a premature rush to judgment. Dyer insisted that Combs was innocent, that all accusations against him were meritless, and that his client had cooperated with authorities. But the evidence seized during those raids would tell a different story. Chapter 6. What they found. In the months following the raids, details began to emerge about what federal agents had discovered inside Diddy's mansions. The items seized painted a disturbing picture of what had allegedly been happening behind the gates of those exclusive properties. According to prosecutors, agents found more than 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lubricant. The sheer quantity seemed almost absurd when it was first reported, leading to widespread mockery on social media. But witnesses who would later testify at trial explained the significance of this discovery. Baby oil was a central element of the freak-offs, used in such quantities that participants would be glistening throughout the encounters. The oil was not an occasional accessory. It was a fundamental requirement, applied and reapplied constantly throughout sessions that could last for days. Former girlfriend Cassie would later testify that approximately 10 large bottles of Johnson's brand baby oil were used during each freak-off, with Combs demanding that she and other participants reapply it every 5 minutes to maintain the desired appearance. If he felt you were too dry, he would let you know, she testified. You need to be shining. The 1,000 bottles found during the raids represented not excess or hoarding, but rather the supplies necessary for the frequency and intensity of the encounters that allegedly took place at Combs' properties. Voicemails played during the trial revealed Combs' obsession with maintaining adequate supplies. In one message to his chief of staff, recorded during a hotel stay, Combs complained about running low on baby oil and demanded an immediate restock. "Can't believe I'm out," he said. "Put 20 bottles in this motherfucker." The casual nature of the request suggested that such orders were routine, that maintaining supplies for freak-offs was simply part of the regular operations of Combs's entourage. Agents also found drugs during the searches. Substances that tested positive for MDMA and ketamine were discovered during the searches. These drugs, according to testimony, were regularly supplied to participants during freak-offs, allowing the encounters to continue for days at a time. Weapons were also seized. Photographs, later released by prosecutors, showed firearms and ammunition found at the properties. Cassie would testify that she had seen guns just laid out at various Combs properties, and that Combs and his associates sometimes armed themselves when they perceived threats. Electronic devices were a major focus of the seizure. Agents took laptops, phones, and other devices that would later yield extensive digital evidence. According to testimony, Combs recorded many of the freak-offs, creating videos that could potentially be used as blackmail material against participants. Investigators found approximately 50 explicit videos from 2021 and 2022 alone on the seized devices. Cash was also discovered. Approximately $9,000 in cash was found at one location, consistent with the cash payments that were allegedly made to escorts and others involved in the freak-offs. The evidence seized during the raids would form the foundation of the federal case against Combs. Combined with witness testimony and financial records, it would eventually lead to his arrest and trial. Chapter 7. The Hotel Video. In May 2024, CNN obtained and aired surveillance footage that would become the most damning piece of evidence in the public's perception of Sean Combs. The video showed the 2016 incident that Cassie had described in her lawsuit, the night she said Combs had chased her down a hotel hallway and assaulted her. The footage was captured at the Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles. It showed Cassie, wearing a towel, walking down a hotel corridor. Combs, wearing only a towel around his waist, emerged from a room and followed her. What happened next was captured in brutal detail by the hotel's security cameras. The video showed Combs grabbing Cassie, throwing her to the ground, and kicking her as she lay on the floor. He picked up a glass vase and threw it at her. He dragged her by her clothing as she tried to crawl away. The assault continued for what seemed like an eternity, with Combs repeatedly attacking her as she attempted to escape. A hotel security guard eventually intervened, appearing in the frame and apparently instructing the couple to return to their room. According to later testimony, the security guard declined a cash payment from Combs to keep quiet about what he had witnessed. The video was devastating because it transformed allegations into visual proof. For months, Combs had denied any wrongdoing, claiming that the accusations against him were fabricated by the people seeking paydays. But the video showed exactly the kind of violence that Cassie and other accusers had described. Within days of the video's release, Combs posted an apology on social media. "It's so difficult to reflect on the darkest times in your life, but sometimes you got to do that," he said in the video. "I was disgusted then when I did it. I'm disgusted now." He acknowledged that he had sought out professional help and gone to therapy and rehab. But for many, the apology was too little, too late. An attorney for Cassie noted that Combs was only compelled to apologize once his repeated denials were proven false, calling his words pathetic desperation that would not sway anyone. The apology also stood in stark contrast to his previous statements, denying that he had done any of the awful things being alleged. The hotel video transformed public perception of Sean Combs virtually overnight. The man who had been one of the most celebrated figures in entertainment was now seen as an abuser, his denials exposed as lies by irrefutable video evidence. Chapter 8. The Arrest. On September 16, 2024, nearly 6 months after the raids on his mansions, Sean Combs was arrested in the lobby of a Manhattan hotel. Federal agents took him into custody on an indictment that had been returned by a grand jury and unsealed that same day. The indictment charged Combs with 3 counts: racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud or coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. If convicted on all counts, he faced a mandatory minimum of 15 years in prison and a maximum sentence of life. The indictment described Combs as the leader of a criminal enterprise that had engaged in numerous illegal activities over a period of more than a decade. According to prosecutors, Combs had abused, threatened, and coerced women and others around him to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct. The enterprise allegedly included employees of Combs' various businesses who helped carry out and cover up his crimes. Security staff, household staff, personal assistants, and high-ranking supervisors were all allegedly involved in facilitating the freak-offs, obtaining drugs and supplies, paying off potential witnesses, and threatening anyone who might expose what was happening. The indictment detailed specific allegations, including claims that Combs had struck, punched, and dragged women on numerous occasions. He allegedly threw objects at them, kicked them, and enlisted his staff to help him hide the violence. He allegedly used the recorded videos of freak-offs as blackmail material, threatening to release compromising footage if victims spoke out or tried to leave relationships with him. Combs was taken to the federal courthouse in Manhattan, where he appeared before a magistrate judge wearing a black t-shirt and gray workout pants. His hands were clasped behind his back, and witnesses described him as looking stunned. His defense attorney, Mark Agnifilo, argued that Combs should be released on bail, offering a $50 million bond secured by his Miami mansion. Agnifilo claimed that Combs had come to New York specifically because he knew an indictment was imminent, that he wanted to surrender peacefully rather than risk anyone being hurt during an arrest at his home. But the judge denied bail, finding that Combs posed a flight risk and a danger to the community. The waterfront boat dock at his Miami compound was specifically cited as a concern, as it would make it easy for Combs to flee if released. Sean Combs, one of the wealthiest and most powerful figures in entertainment, was taken to the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn to await trial. Chapter 9. Inside the MDC. The Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, where Combs was held pending trial, was a far cry from his Star Island mansion. The federal facility had a troubled reputation, with reports of violence, inadequate conditions, and mismanagement. For a man who had spent decades surrounded by luxury, the contrast could not have been more stark. Combs's attorneys made multiple attempts to secure his release on bail, each time arguing that he was not a flight risk and that the conditions at the MDC were unsuitable for him. They proposed house arrest at his Miami mansion, electronic monitoring, and various other arrangements. Each time, judges denied their requests. During his time at the MDC, Combs communicated with family members and worked with his legal team to prepare for trial. Reports emerged that he was receiving counseling and therapy while incarcerated. His attorneys argued that this demonstrated his commitment to addressing the issues that had led to his arrest. Meanwhile, the legal process moved forward. Prosecutors filed additional charges, bringing the total number of counts against Combs to 5. They gathered more evidence, interviewed more witnesses, and prepared for what would become one of the most closely watched trials in years. In April 2025, Judge Arun Subramanian set a trial date for May 5, 2025. The trial would take place in the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan, just blocks from where Combs had been arrested nearly 8 months earlier. Chapter 10. The trial begins. On May 5, 2025, the trial of Sean Combs began in the Federal District Court in Lower Manhattan. The prosecution and defense both understood the stakes. For Combs, a conviction on all charges could mean spending the rest of his life in prison. For the prosecution, this was an opportunity to hold accountable one of the most powerful figures ever charged with sex trafficking. Jury selection began on May 12, 2025. The process took nearly a week as prosecutors, defense attorneys, and Judge Subramanian examined approximately 100 prospective jurors. The final panel consisted of 12 jurors and 6 alternates, 8 men and 4 women, ranging in age from 30 to 74, from Manhattan, the Bronx, and Westchester County. The prosecution's opening statement laid out their theory of the case. Assistant U.S. Attorney Emily Johnson told jurors that Combs had used his status and power to violently force women into sexual acts they did not want to participate in. She described the freak-offs in detail, explaining how Combs had used drugs, threats, and physical violence to coerce women into participating. She told jurors about the evidence seized from his mansions, including the 1,000 bottles of baby oil and the recorded videos. He used his companies to manipulate women, forcing them with male escorts to have sex while he watched, Johnson said. He and his inner circle made sure he got everything he wanted. Defense attorney Tenny Garagos offered a different interpretation. "We will not shy away from the things he did, but we will not own the things he did not do," she told jurors. "He is physical. He is a drug user. You may know of his love of baby oil. Is that a federal crime? No." Garagos argued that the case was fundamentally about Combs' private sex life, which he said was not the government's business. This case is about Sean Combs' private personal sex life. The government has no place in his private bedrooms. They say it is not about his private sex life, but the evidence will show that it is. The stage was set for weeks of testimony that would expose the inner workings of Diddy's empire in graphic, disturbing detail. Chapter 11. Cassie takes the stand. The prosecution's star witness was Cassandra Ventura, the woman whose lawsuit had started the unraveling of Sean Combs' empire. She testified for 4 days during the first week of the trial, walking jurors through more than a decade of her relationship with Combs. Cassie, who was 8 months pregnant at the time of her testimony, appeared in the courtroom wearing professional attire, her demeanor calm but emotional. She described meeting Combs in 2005 when she was just 19 years old, signed to his record label with dreams of becoming a star. She described how their relationship evolved from professional to romantic, and how the romance gradually transformed into something much darker. The testimony about the freak-offs was graphic and disturbing. Cassie explained that Combs had first proposed the encounters when she was in her early 20s. The first freak-off occurred at his Los Angeles mansion with a male escort, and eventually they became almost weekly occurrences. Each encounter typically lasted between 24 and 72 hours, with the longest lasting 4 days. Participants stayed awake throughout, fueled by drugs including ecstasy, molly, and cocaine. "Who decided when a freak-off was over?" Prosecutor Emily Johnson asked. "Ultimately, that would be Sean," Cassie responded. "Did you want to participate in every freak-off?" "No," Cassie answered. "I felt like it was all I was good for." It was disgusting. She described how Combs would direct the encounters like a filmmaker, specifying positions, lighting, and angles. She explained his obsession with baby oil, describing how he wanted everyone to be glistening and would criticize her if she looked dry, demanding that she reapply oil every 5 minutes. Approximately 10 large bottles of baby oil were used during each encounter. The testimony included disturbing details about the conditions she was expected to endure. She was expected to participate even during her menstrual period, which would leave blood on the linens. She contracted recurring urinary tract infections so severe that antibiotics stopped working. She described incidents involving urine and other bodily fluids that left her feeling humiliated and worthless. Throughout her testimony, Cassie broke down multiple times. "I felt pretty horrible about myself," she said through tears. "I was disgusted. They made me feel worthless." She also testified about the violence she had experienced at Combs' hands. She described being beaten, kicked, thrown against walls, and threatened. She recalled the hotel incident captured on video, explaining that she had been trying to escape a freak-off when Combs chased her down the hallway. Perhaps most significantly, Cassie testified about how Combs had used the recordings of freak-offs as leverage against her. She explained that she lived in constant fear that he would release the videos if she ever tried to leave or speak out against him. This fear, she said, kept her trapped in the relationship for years. The defense cross-examined Cassie extensively, attempting to portray their relationship as consensual and mutual. Defense attorney Ana Estevao questioned her about the luxury lifestyle she had enjoyed while with Combs, about gifts and money she had received, about whether she had participated willingly in the freak-offs. Cassie maintained that her participation was coerced through threats and violence. When Cassie concluded her testimony, she had provided jurors with a detailed, first-hand account of exactly what prosecutors alleged had happened behind the gates of Diddy's mansions. The question now was whether they would believe her. Chapter 12. The other witnesses. Over the 6 weeks of trial, prosecutors called 34 witnesses to support their case against Sean Combs. Each added another piece to the puzzle, another perspective on what had happened inside his empire. A former hotel security guard testified about the night of the infamous hallway incident. He described witnessing Combs assault Cassie and said that Combs had offered him cash to keep quiet. He refused the payment and instead instructed the couple to return to their room. Male escorts who had participated in the freak-offs testified about being recruited, often through websites, and being paid thousands of dollars for their services. They described being directed by Combs, being supplied with drugs, and witnessing his interactions with the women present. Former employees of Combs testified about their roles in facilitating his activities. Personal assistants described obtaining supplies for freak-offs, booking hotel rooms under false names, and helping to clean up afterward. Security staff described their roles in protecting Combs and ensuring that what happened inside his properties remained secret. Dawn Richard, a former member of the pop group Danity Kane, which Combs had assembled through his MTV reality show, Making the Band, testified about witnessing Combs assault Cassie on multiple occasions. She described one incident in Los Angeles where Combs became enraged about his breakfast not being ready and attacked Cassie with a skillet. He came downstairs angry and was saying where the was his eggs, Richard testified. He was telling Cassie that she never gets anything right, and he proceeded to come over to her and took the skillet with the eggs in it and tried to hit her over the head with it, and she fell to the ground. Another former girlfriend, who testified under the pseudonym Jane, provided 6 days of testimony about her 3-year relationship with Combs. She alleged that he had provided her drugs and forced her to participate in freak-offs throughout their time together. She described an incident in June 2024 when Combs allegedly beat her for hours after an argument. A former personal assistant known as Mia testified that she had witnessed Combs's frequent violence and had been required to clean up hotel rooms after his drug-fueled sex marathons. She also alleged that Combs had sexually assaulted her while she worked for him. Her testimony was emotional, and she told jurors that discussing these events was the most traumatizing, worst thing that's ever happened to me. Federal agents testified about the raids on Combs's mansions and the evidence they had seized. Homeland Security Investigations Special Agent Joseph Curciello described finding the baby oil, drugs, cash, and electronic devices. He testified that investigators had found approximately 50 explicit videos from 2021 and 2022 on Combs' devices. Jurors were shown 2 of these videos using headphones and individual screens. Voicemails and text messages were played for the jury, revealing communications between Combs and his associates about arranging freak-offs. In one voicemail to his former chief of staff, Combs requested a restock of baby oil at a hotel. "Tell them to call me before they are on the way," he said. "Can't believe I'm out. Put 20 bottles in this The cumulative effect of the testimony was devastating. Witness after witness described the same patterns of behavior: violence, drugs, coerced sexual encounters, and the use of Combs' power and wealth to ensure silence. Chapter 13. The defense. The defense strategy in the Combs trial was unusual. Rather than presenting their own witnesses, defense attorneys announced that they would not call anyone to testify. Instead, they relied on cross-examination of prosecution witnesses and the evidence already entered into the record. Throughout the trial, defense attorneys attempted to reframe the narrative. They argued that the relationships between Combs and the women were consensual, that the freak-offs were mutually agreed upon sexual activities between adults. They pointed to the luxury lifestyles the women had enjoyed, the gifts they had received, the years they had spent in relationships with Combs despite allegedly being mistreated. Defense attorney Mark Agnifilo argued that the prosecution's case was fundamentally about Combs' unconventional but legal private life. He acknowledged that Combs used drugs, that he engaged in unusual sexual practices, that he could be physically aggressive, but he argued that none of this amounted to the crimes charged. On cross-examination of Cassie, defense attorneys probed inconsistencies in her account and questioned her motivations. They pointed to the settlement she had received after filing her lawsuit, suggesting that financial incentives influenced her allegations. Cassie maintained that she was telling the truth. The defense also filed a motion for mistrial during the proceedings, alleging that prosecutors had presented testimony they knew or should have known was false. The motion focused on testimony about an incident in which Combs allegedly dangled a woman from a balcony. The judge denied the motion. In closing arguments, defense attorney Tenny Geragos told jurors that the government had failed to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. She argued that the relationships were complex but ultimately consensual, that the women had chosen to stay with Combs and participate in his lifestyle. Chapter 14. The verdict. On June 26, 2025, closing arguments concluded and the case went to the jury. Jurors deliberated for 13 hours over 3 days before reaching a verdict on July 2, 2025. The courtroom was packed as jurors filed back in to announce their decision. Combs sat between his attorneys, watching the jury foreperson as the verdicts were read. On count 1, racketeering conspiracy, not guilty. On count 2, sex trafficking involving Cassandra Ventura, not guilty. On count 3, transportation to engage in prostitution, guilty. On count 4, sex trafficking involving the victim known as Jane, not guilty. On count 5, transportation to engage in prostitution, guilty. The verdict was a mixed result. Combs was acquitted of the most serious charges, racketeering and sex trafficking, which could have sent him to prison for life. But he was convicted of 2 counts of violating the Mann Act, a federal law that makes it a crime to transport someone across state lines for purposes of prostitution. When the first not guilty verdicts were announced, Combs put his hand to his face, clearly relieved. When he heard guilty on the count 3, he was visibly startled. But as more not guilty verdicts followed, he began to relax. He held hands with attorney Tenny Geragos, made prayer hands toward the jury, and appeared to tell his family, "I'm coming home." Each count of transportation to engage in prostitution carried a maximum sentence of 10 years in prison. Prosecutors indicated that they would seek a sentence of 51 to 63 months, roughly 4 to 5 years, based on federal sentencing guidelines. The verdict represented a significant defeat for prosecutors who had charged Combs with being the leader of a criminal enterprise that engaged in sex trafficking. The jury clearly rejected that theory, while still finding that Combs had broken the law by transporting women across state lines for prostitution. For the accusers who had testified, the verdict was bittersweet. The man they said had abused them had been found guilty, but not of the most serious charges they had hoped would result in a lengthy prison sentence. Chapter 15. The sentencing. The sentencing hearing for Sean Combs took place on October 3, 2025, before Judge Aaron Subramanian in the same Manhattan courtroom where the trial had been held. It would be a dramatic conclusion to a case that had captivated the nation. Prosecutors asked for a sentence of more than 11 years, arguing that despite the acquittals on the most serious charges, Combs' conduct warranted significant punishment. They pointed to the evidence presented at trial, the testimony of multiple victims, and the need to send a message that powerful people would be held accountable for their crimes. Defense attorneys asked for a sentence of just 14 months, which would have been less than time served given that Combs had been in custody since his arrest in September 2024. They argued that the jury's acquittals on racketeering and sex trafficking demonstrated that the government had overcharged the case and that Combs should be sentenced only for the crimes of which he was actually convicted. Before the judge announced the sentence, Combs addressed the court. He apologized for what he called sick actions and asked for mercy. "The old me died in jail and a new version of me was reborn," he told the judge, claiming that his time in custody had transformed him. Judge Subramanian was not swayed. He sentenced Combs to 50 months in prison, or 4 years and 2 months. He also imposed a fine of $500,000 and 5 years of supervised release after Combs completes his prison term. In explaining the sentence, Judge Subramanian made clear that he had considered the evidence of coercion and abuse that had been presented at trial, even though the jury had not convicted Combs of the most serious charges. He used the word coercion repeatedly, noting the power imbalance between Combs and his victims. Because Combs had been in custody since September 2024, he received credit for approximately 13 months of time already served. His projected release date, according to the Federal Bureau of Prisons, is May 8, 2028. After the sentencing, defense attorneys announced that they would appeal, calling the sentence unconstitutional. They argued that the judge had relied on acquitted conduct, evidence related to charges on which Combs had been found not guilty, in determining the sentence. This practice, while permitted under federal sentencing guidelines, has been criticized by legal scholars and may face challenges in appeals courts. Combs was transferred to FCY Fort Dix, a federal prison in New Jersey, to serve his sentence. The mogul, who had once commanded mansions worth over $100 million, was now an inmate in a medium-security federal facility. Chapter 16. The mansions today. As Sean Combs sits in federal prison, his real estate empire remains in limbo. The mansions that were once symbols of his success are now associated primarily with the crimes that prosecutors said occurred within their walls. The Holmby Hills mansion in Los Angeles was listed for sale in September 2024, just days before Combs' arrest, with an asking price of $61.5 million. The listing did not mention its celebrity owner or its connection to the federal investigation. Instead, it emphasized the property's grandeur, its 10 bedrooms and 13 bathrooms, its classic European details throughout. But finding a buyer proved difficult. The property's association with Combs' crimes made it a challenging sell. Real estate experts noted that potential buyers might not want the affiliation with Combs, and that the notorious history of the property could significantly impact its value. In December 2025, the mansion was delisted, taken off the market after failing to find a buyer. The property remains in limbo, its fate uncertain. Combs' attorneys have indicated that he retains the right to sell the property from prison, but the challenges of doing so are considerable. Some experts have suggested that Combs could convert the property into a rental, potentially commanding as much as $20,000 per night for luxury rentals. Others have suggested that the property might eventually sell at a significant discount to a buyer willing to overlook its history. The Miami compound on Star Island remains in Combs' possession. The two adjacent properties, worth approximately $50 million combined, were offered as collateral during Combs' unsuccessful bail applications. The waterfront location and private dock that once symbolized Combs' wealth and freedom became evidence of why he should be detained, with judges citing the boat dock as a potential means of flight. The future of these properties is uncertain. If Combs appeals successfully and his sentence is reduced or overturned, he might eventually return to live in them. If he serves his full sentence and is released, he will face 5 years of supervised release that may include restrictions on his movements and activities. The properties could also be subject to civil judgments if victims file successful lawsuits seeking damages. What is certain is that these mansions will never again represent what they once did. They were once symbols of the American dream, of a man who rose from nothing to build an empire. Now they are symbols of that empire's fall, reminders of what allegedly happened behind their gates. Chapter 17. The Victims. Beyond the legal proceedings and the fate of the mansions, the Combs case is fundamentally about the people who say they were victimized. Their stories, told in courtrooms and in lawsuits, paint a picture of lives disrupted and damaged by a powerful man who allegedly used his wealth and influence to abuse and control them. Cassie Ventura signed with Bad Boy Records when she was 19, full of dreams about becoming a star. Instead, she alleges, she spent more than a decade trapped in an abusive relationship, forced to participate in degrading sexual encounters, beaten when she displeased Combs, and terrified into silence by threats of blackmail. She recorded hundreds of songs during her time with Bad Boy, but most were never released. Her career, which should have flourished under the guidance of one of the most powerful men in music, instead stalled while she allegedly served as Combs' victim. The woman known as Jane testified about 3 years of abuse, culminating in an alleged beating that lasted hours. She described being forced to participate in freak-offs against her will, being supplied drugs that kept her dependent on Combs, and living in fear of his violent temper. Dawn. Richard joined Danity Kane in 2005, hoping that Combs' guidance would launch her to stardom. Instead, she says she witnessed repeated violence against Cassie and others, creating trauma that affected her for years. She eventually filed her own lawsuit against Combs in 2024, alleging that he had groped, assaulted, and imprisoned her. And there are others, some who have come forward publicly, some who testified at trial under pseudonyms, and likely some who have never spoken at all. The pattern described by these accusers is consistent. A powerful man who used his wealth and status to prey on women, often young women at the beginning of their careers, who are vulnerable to his influence and afraid to speak out. The Me Too movement, which began in 2017, created an environment where these accusations could finally be heard. The lawsuits filed against Combs came in the wake of similar reckonings for other powerful men in entertainment. From Harvey Weinstein to R. Kelly, the Combs case demonstrated that even the most powerful figures could be brought to account, though the legal process was long and the outcomes uncertain. For the victims, the trial verdict was complicated. Combs was convicted, but not of the most serious charges. He will serve time in prison, but perhaps less than many felt he deserved. The women who testified will carry the trauma of their experiences regardless of the legal outcome. Chapter 18. The empire crumbles. The legal troubles that culminated in Combs's arrest and conviction had cascading effects throughout his business empire. The mogul who had built a fortune estimated at hundreds of millions of dollars saw his empire begin to crumble as allegations mounted and his reputation collapsed. In November 2023, amid the first wave of lawsuits, Combs stepped back as chairman of Revolt Media, the television and digital media company he had founded in 2013. The company, which had been built around Combs' vision of a music-focused media platform, distanced itself from its founder as the allegations mounted. Business partnerships that had generated millions in revenue began to unravel. While the specifics of many deals remained confidential, the association with an accused sex trafficker was toxic for brands that had once been eager to align themselves with Diddy's image of success and sophistication. The value of his real estate holdings became uncertain. Properties that had once been trophies became liabilities, their worth diminished by their association with alleged crimes. The Holmby Hills mansion, purchased for $39 million and listed for $61.5 million, failed to find a buyer at any price. Perhaps most significantly, Combs' reputation, the intangible asset that had been the foundation of his entire empire, was destroyed. For decades, Diddy had represented black excellence in business, the possibility of rising from nothing to build something magnificent. His image was central to every deal he made, every partnership he formed, every product he endorsed. That image was now replaced by something very different. The hotel video of him assaulting Cassie, the testimony about freak-offs and baby oil, the photographs of the 1,000 bottles of lubricant seized from his mansion, the verdict finding him guilty of federal crimes. The man who had built his empire on his image now faced the reality that his image was irreparably damaged. Whatever remained of his business holdings, whatever he might be able to salvage after prison, would be forever tainted by what the world had learned about what happened behind the gates of his mansions. Chapter 19. The Appeal. From the day of his sentencing, Sean Combs and his legal team made clear that they would fight to overturn his conviction and sentence. In early 2026, they filed a detailed appellate brief asking the court to vacate his sentence and order his immediate release. The appeal focused on the judge's reliance on acquitted conduct in determining the sentence. Defense attorneys argued that Judge Subramanian had based the 50-month sentence on evidence related to charges that the jury had explicitly rejected, including the racketeering and sex trafficking counts. This practice, they argued, violated constitutional principles and the 2024 federal sentencing guidelines. The district court imposed a record-setting sentence by relying on conduct the jury explicitly rejected, in direct conflict with the 2024 sentencing guidelines and core constitutional principles, the appellate brief stated. The defense accused the judge of having acted as a 13th juror, effectively imposing punishment for crimes of which Combs had been acquitted. The appeal asked the court to either grant a judgment of acquittal, vacate the sentence and order immediate release, or remand the case for resentencing limited strictly to the offenses of conviction. If successful, the appeal could result in Combs being released immediately, given the time he has already served. The outcome of the appeal remains uncertain. The practice of considering acquitted conduct at sentencing has been criticized by legal scholars and some judges, but it has been upheld by courts, including the Supreme Court. Whether Combs' case will be the one that changes this practice remains to be seen. As of this writing, Combs remains at FCY Fort Dix in New Jersey, with a projected release date of May 8, 2028. His attorneys continue to fight for his freedom, while prosecutors maintain that his sentence was appropriate given the evidence presented at trial. Chapter 20. The meaning of the mansions. What do Diddy's mansions mean now, after everything that has been revealed? They stand as monuments to a particular kind of American story, one that encompasses both spectacular success and spectacular fall. The mansions represented the pinnacle of the American dream. A man born to modest circumstances in Harlem, who lost his father at age 2, who worked his way up through determination and talent, had accumulated properties worth over $100 million. The Star Island compound in Miami, the Holmby Hills estate in Los Angeles, these were the rewards for decades of hustle and achievement. But the mansions also represented something darker. Behind their gates, prosecutors alleged terrible crimes were committed. The same properties that symbolized success became venues for exploitation and abuse. The privacy and security that wealth afforded, the ability to keep the world at bay, allegedly enabled conduct that would have been impossible to hide in less exclusive circumstances. The dual nature of the mansions reflects the dual nature of Combs himself. He was genuinely one of the most influential figures in American entertainment, a mogul who created opportunities for countless artists and built businesses that generated billions in revenue. He was also, according to the evidence presented at trial, a man who used his power and wealth to abuse and exploit vulnerable people. The fall of Diddy's mansion empire is a reminder that wealth and power do not guarantee impunity. For years, Combs allegedly committed crimes while hiding behind the gates of his exclusive properties, protected by his money and his status. But eventually, the walls came down. Federal agents stormed through those gates, seized the evidence of his alleged crimes, and brought him to justice. It is also a reminder of how power can corrupt. The same attributes that enabled Combs to build his empire, his drive, his ambition, his willingness to do whatever it took to succeed, allegedly also led him to believe that he could do anything to anyone without consequence. The mansions were not just residences. They were stages for the exercise of unchecked power. Chapter 21. Lessons and Consequences. The Combs case offers lessons that extend beyond the life of one man or the fate of his properties. The first lesson is about the importance of believing victims. For years, rumors circulated about Combs' behavior, whispered warnings in the entertainment industry about what happened at his parties. But it was not until Cassie filed her lawsuit in 2023 that the truth began to emerge publicly. The courage of accusers to come forward, to face public scrutiny and legal challenges, was essential to bringing Combs to justice. The second lesson is about the persistence of investigation. The federal investigation into Combs took years. Agents conducted interviews, gathered evidence, obtained search warrants, and built a case piece by piece. The raids on his mansions in March 2024 were not the beginning of the investigation, but a culmination of months of work. This kind of thorough, patient investigation is necessary to hold powerful people accountable. The third lesson is about the complexity of justice. Combs was convicted, but not of the most serious charges. He will serve time in prison, but less time than prosecutors sought. For some, this represents a failure of the legal system to adequately punish someone who allegedly committed terrible crimes. For others, it demonstrates the system working as designed, with a jury weighing evidence and reaching a verdict based on proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The fourth lesson is about the fragility of reputation. Combs spent decades building his image as a successful entrepreneur and entertainer. That image was destroyed in a matter of months once the allegations became public. The hotel video, the testimony about freak-offs, the photographs of evidence seized from his mansions, all of this transformed public perception virtually overnight. Reputation, once lost, is almost impossible to regain. The fifth lesson is about the use of power. Combs allegedly used his power to abuse people for years, confident that his wealth and status would protect him. He allegedly used his power to silence victims, to threaten anyone who might speak out, to ensure that what happened behind his gates remained secret. This is not a new story. Powerful people have always been tempted to abuse their power. But the Combs case is a reminder that power is not permanent, and that eventually even the most powerful can be brought to account. Chapter 22. The Future. What comes next for Sean Combs? Barring a successful appeal, he will remain in federal prison until at least 2028. He will be in his late 50s when he is released, facing 5 years of supervised release that will likely include restrictions on his activities. Whether he can rebuild any kind of career after prison is unclear. Some celebrities have successfully rehabilitated their images after serving time, emerging from prison to continued success. Others have been permanently defined by their crimes, unable to escape the shadow of what they did. The entertainment industry that Combs once dominated has changed dramatically since his arrest. The Cyber Me Too movement has created new expectations around accountability and behavior. Young artists who once might have sought out a mentorship with Diddy now have countless other options for launching their careers. The mystique of the Diddy brand, the allure of his parties and his lifestyle, has been replaced by the documented reality of what allegedly happened at those parties and in that lifestyle. His properties, too, face an uncertain future. The Holmby Hills mansion remains unsold. The Star Island compound sits waiting. These properties that once represented the height of success now carry the weight of what was revealed about their owner. Finding buyers willing to overlook that history, willing to live in spaces associated with the crimes described at trial, will be challenging. And the victims continue to cope with the aftermath of their experiences. The legal proceedings are largely over, but the trauma remains. Some have spoken publicly about their experiences, using their stories to help others who may be in similar situations. Others have chosen to move on privately, seeking to rebuild lives that were disrupted by their involvement with Combs. The Combs case will be studied for years to come by legal scholars, entertainment industry observers, and anyone interested in the intersection of power, wealth, and accountability. It represents a significant moment in the ongoing cultural reckoning around sexual abuse and exploitation, particularly by powerful men in entertainment. Chapter 23. Conclusion. The story of Diddy's mansion empire is ultimately a story about the corrupting nature of unchecked power. Sean Combs built something remarkable, rising from modest beginnings to create a fortune and an influence that few could match. His mansions, sprawling estates on Star Island and in Holmby Hills, were monuments to that achievement. But somewhere along the way, according to prosecutors and the witnesses who testified at trial, the same drive and ambition that built the empire led Combs to believe he was above the law. The privacy that his wealth afforded, the security that surrounded his properties, the deference that his status commanded, all of these allegedly enabled conduct that violated not just legal standards, but basic human decency. The raids on his mansions in March 2024 marked the beginning of the end. Federal agents stormed through gates that had kept the world out for years, seizing evidence that would eventually lead to his arrest and conviction. The same properties that had symbolized his success became crime scenes, their luxury interiors now documented in photographs of baby oil and drug paraphernalia. The trial that followed exposed the alleged reality of what happened behind those gates. Witnesses testified about years of abuse, about drug-fueled sexual encounters that lasted for days, about violence and threats and control. The testimony was graphic, disturbing, and ultimately compelling enough to convince a jury that Combs had broken the law. The verdict was not everything prosecutors sought. Combs was acquitted of racketeering and sex trafficking, the most serious charges. But he was convicted of transporting women across state lines for prostitution, crimes that carry real consequences. He sits today in federal prison, his freedom gone, his reputation destroyed, his empire in ruins. The mansions remain. The Star Island compound still overlooks Biscayne Bay. The Holmby Hills estate still sits among the most expensive homes in America. But they are no longer symbols of success. They are reminders of what can happen when power is abused, when wealth is used to exploit rather than to uplift, when the gates that protect privacy also enable crimes. For those who followed this case, for those who testified against Combs, for those who will study it in years to come, the lesson is clear. No one is above accountability. Not even someone who built mansions on Star Island and in Holmby Hills. Not even someone who commanded an empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Not even Diddy. If this story has moved you, I encourage you to subscribe and share it with others who need to know. These stories matter because they show that power does not equal impunity, that victims can be heard, that even the most exclusive gates can be breached by justice, and that no fortune is large enough to buy permanent protection from accountability. Tell me in the comments, what do you think the future holds for Sean Combs? Should the mansions be preserved, sold, or demolished? And what do you think should happen to powerful people who abuse their positions? What lessons can we learn from this case about accountability and justice in America today? Your thoughts matter, and I read every single comment. Thank you for watching. The rise and fall of Diddy's mansion empire is a story that will be remembered for generations to come. It is a cautionary tale about power and its abuse, about wealth and its limits, about justice delayed but ultimately delivered. The mansions that once symbolized the ultimate success story now stand as reminders that no amount of money can buy impunity, that no gates are high enough to keep out accountability, and that the truth, however long it takes, will eventually emerge. Until next time,